Welcome to the opening talk. We're about to introduce the panelists to you, but before we do that, we'd like to just give you an idea of the two main focuses, the key questions that have been collected for this panel that we're about to launch. So the first focus is on what concrete role can citizenship education, arts and culture play in meeting the challenges of the pandemic and climate change, and for positive social change. What solutions, in terms of new discourses, approaches, and strategies, can citizenship education, art, and culture offer to meet these challenges? Our second focus is on what lessons should, or in fact must, we learn from this pandemic for the educational and cultural life of our societies. What have we gained? What have we lost? Can we already take stock? According to Friedrich Hölderin, can we apply to the world today a quote, "Where there is danger, the element of rescue also grows." Do we have any indications of this?
Thanks so much, Tanya. And we have a couple of our strategic partner organizations here on the stage and live on the Zoom talk joining us in the virtual setting around it here. Notably, it's the Goethe-Institut, which has been a long-term partner, a very warm welcome, and the Prince Claus Foundation, which is joining us virtually around it here. They've created this or initiated this wonderful Take Me to the River exhibition that we're going to hear a lot more about a little bit later on. And then also the German Federal Foreign Agency is also joining us, which has also been a long-term partner of the NICI program, and especially the cultural policy is becoming an ever more important element of the policy and diplomatic mixes around it there. So we're very, very curious to hear lots of different perspectives around it here. Let's go and introduce our panelists personally.
Thank you. So to kick off the introductions, I'd like to introduce Johannes Ebert, the General Secretary of the Goethe-Institut in Germany. A warm wave from his side.
Yeah. And then we have live joining us on Zoom, Maya Khalil, who is an arts and culture consultant and the curator of the exhibition. Can we see Maya Khalil on the screen?
Hello, everyone.
Great. Very warm welcome.
So, also joining us on a Zoom call is Joumana Zein Khoury, the director of the Prince Claus Fund for Culture and Development in the Netherlands. Welcome.
Great. And from the German Foreign Office is Andreas, the head of the Directorate-General for Culture and Communication at the office, and you have a special focus in our topics.
And to wrap up our round of introductions, I'd also like to wish a very warm welcome to Thomas Krüger, the director of the Federal Agency for Civic Education in Germany. And here we also have a wave. So we will be using translators, or rather interpreters, for this call. And I'm going to be addressing now some questions in German to Thomas Krüger, and these will then be translated in the live stream. Okay? So, Herr Krüger. Welches ist Ihre wichtigste Lehre aus der Corona-Krise für Demokratie, politische Bildung und nachhaltige Entwicklung?
In terms of educational and cultural life for our societies, maybe you can also give us a personal insight. It's a really painful experience that the social contacts are limited or reduced. This is really bad because social contacts are really important, especially for political activities. We need them. But what we've learned regarding our learnings, I can say that the digital possibilities are transnational. We can communicate in a transnational way, and borders aren't important anymore. We stay in touch, even though we are in a very bad situation right at the moment, but we try to give a sign to show that another life is possible. So thank you very much, Mr. Ebert. You are the director of a network of cultural institutes. So what role should art and culture play in shaping the current social transformation processes, and what is the most important challenge for you as head of worldwide network of cultural institutes? So I think we need to open up, we need to create spaces spaces and areas for new ideas, for encounters of people, and we need to support them. So I think it's really important in this current situation to definitely be aware of this task. And we have 157 institutes in more than 90 countries, and what we try to do is to stay in touch with our partners, even though because we know the partners are under pressure financially speaking, and we need to, what we would like to do is to support them, to keep on funding them and to face the challenges. So the pandemic is a huge challenge we definitely have to face. We know that digitalization is important. We need to move online, not only language courses, but also other offers. Now we have to think about the future. What can we do in the future? What did we learn, or what are we about to learn, or what will be in the future?
So I'd like to direct the next questions to Maya El Khalil. What new multidisciplinary approaches can artists develop under the impact of the pandemic and in the context of the debate on climate change?
Thank you. I'm going to start with explaining the reason why I am here today. Is that in 2018, the Prince Claus and the Goethe-Institut have launched a call for cultural and artistic responses to environmental change. Now, they awarded 15 projects grants to work with collectives in indigenous and local communities in Central and South America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. I was asked to curate this exhibition where the stories from these collaborations could be brought together in a physical format. And it was supposed to open today in Berlin. But the pandemic, some projects were delayed, and we had to revert to the platform, which will hopefully to launch in early December. The title of this exhibition is Take Me to the River. It is inspired by a beautiful song. But in this case, it moves to the crucial role and the crucial need to leave the comfort of our viewpoint. I'm not sure if you can still hear me.
Yes? Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got silenced. Okay. So it is important to leave the comfort of our viewpoint, to reach out and to listen to alternative stories by local and indigenous communities, and to reconnect with nature. Now, each project relies on the perspective of communities living the harshest realities of the climate emergency. These communities suffer, yet they also possess intimate and irreplaceable knowledge of abused environment, knowledge that we can learn from. Beyond collaboration, these projects express ways of word-making, of countering the narrow individualism that we operate within. Now, we talk about collaborations, we talk about communities, we talk about interdisciplinary, whether cultural and scientific disciplines. These are all concepts that are all the more important today in the current planetary crisis, and at a time when fear is creating self-centered perspectives. Friedrich Heinrich, who was with us last week, said, democratize democracies to deal with climate change. And two of the fundamental tenets of democracies are an informed public who have access to unfiltered, non-manipulated, factual information, and an educated population that can process this information and act upon it. The majority of people on this planet live in undemocratic systems. All of the 15 grantees work with communities whose voices have been muffled, even muted. As artists, they open alternative channels to empower these communities to fight extraction, deforestation, and the population and the pollutions of their rivers. So to answer the question, what new multidisciplinary approaches can artists develop? Having experienced 9 months and counting of social distancing, where we have all been a part just when movements were coming together in solidarity to protest against racism, discrimination, inequality, climate change, artists are constantly finding imaginative ways to keep us connected, to find alternative channels of communication, and not only to make visible abuse, extraction, excess, but also to help us imagine ways to shape a different future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that personal perspective. Dirk, back to you.
Thanks so much. And I would like to move on to Joumana, Zein, Khoury, which is also joining us via Zoom. And I would like to hear from you a little bit more about the Prince Claus Fund. Could you perhaps share a few words? And then in particular, we are interested how can spaces be created for artificial reflection, sensitization for climate change, and possible solutions in the fight against climate change. Over to you.
Culture, that's where we go and we work and we support our partners. And throughout our almost 25 years of supporting culture under pressure, and pressure for us can mean conflict, it can mean environmental challenges, such as what we're doing to now with the Goethe-Institut. What we've seen is the amazing way that artists and cultural spaces have to bring very far away or closer by problems and issues and humanize them and bring them much closer to where we are in a way that we are able to grasp them better and understand them better and relate to them better. But apart from that, they're also able, through their creative approach, through their understanding of what is really necessary in the context where they're living in, what kind of innovative and different kind of solutions, and sometimes very simple solutions, can be taken in order to tackle difficult issues such as climate change. And that's really what we see in the projects that Maya has beautifully curated for us.
And to wrap up this round of individual questions, I'd like to address a couple of in German to Andreas Rgen. Was kann die auswärtige Kulturpolitik, insbesondere im Zuge der EU-Ratspräsidentschaft, zur Bewältigung der aktuellen Herausforderungen beitragen? Welchen Beitrag
does it already make? This is the big question.
Welchen Beitrag leistet sie schon? Bitte schön.
Vielen Dank. Das ist ja eine Frage mit ganz vielen Substantiven.
This is a very interesting question.
Okay, so kann man das auch übersetzen.
The beauty of the life.
Indem sie herauskommt aus dem Denken, dass Kulturpolitik.
So what we need to do is we need to get out of the context. So we should not only focus at national states or nation states. No, cultural policy is also important for society and social policy and also for European policies, of course. So Europe is made of different states, smaller states, nation states, and some of the states or countries haven't understood yet that they definitely need to join the European Union or be able to cross borders, to think outside the box, to not only focus at their own issues or problems, but also to think about the European idea. This is important. So what we need to do is that Europe stands together, that we join forces, that we create this idea of a European culture. So in the past, we talked about foreign cultural policy, but this isn't a foreign policy issue anymore, because what we need to do is to create a cultural space, a cultural policy for the European Union. So NICI, the Goethe-Institut, and also the social society need to be included in this idea. We need to translate these ideas into policy. And I think we definitely have a mission, and this mission is what Mr. Ebert saw, creating these spaces for thought, for exchange, this room for maneuver. This is what we definitely need to focus on. we have to focus on diversity and sustainability in our society. And I think in doing this, we can definitely create a great basis, a good foundation for European cultural policy.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Have 2 discussion rounds, each of 10 minutes. I'm going to introduce the topics of the first discussion round in German, and these are going to be directed to Thomas Krüger and Andreas Görgen. And I'm going to read you the questions now. The translation will be done automatically. Welche Lehren sollten und müssen wir bisher aus der Pandemie für das Bildungs-
Which lessons do we have to draw for the civic and cultural life of our societies? Are education and culture at risk of becoming an endangered species in a currently threatened world dominated by political tensions? Examples are the essential nature of culture and education for a transformation, culture and resilience, the contribution of the political sector to art and artists. You have the floor. Well, I think that the challenge, especially when it comes to the area of education, is huge. And let me give you an example. Education is, with its reference to pedagogy, the discipline of human sciences that implies societal changes and always focuses on them. And as a consequence, you should figure out how education works nowadays. We do no longer have a situation where you have one teacher, a pedagogue, that is confronted with students. Today, educational processes are often based on collaborative processes. What does this mean? It means that education does no longer work without participation, without the involvement of students. So teachers become accompanying instructors and students become active shareholders who co-shape education. And this is a huge input also towards democratic education, because there are many different perspectives and interests that are included into the learning processes. And they sort of enroll into these educational processes. And this, based on sustainability, has the direct claim for societal pluralization and democratization. And I really hope that civic education, citizenship education, as we have co-shaped it, as we have experienced it, can make a significant contribution. Well, I would also like to say a few words about education. When you're saying that we question whether education is essential for the system, it's wrong. No, education is not to just satisfy individual needs, something that you buy. No, education, first and foremost, is training in terms of societal life. How do I fit in society? So, culture and education, are they essential for the system? I think this question is wrong. There is no society without the freedom of art and without education. And I think we should move away from this individualistic standpoint. And sorry, the sound is not really good. So society is in charge of providing educational opportunities. And the second aspect brings me back to what I just said about Europe. We want to be world open Europe. We want a country that is open to the world and that is successful because we have such great diversity. And what we have seen and learned with the pandemic is an acceleration of renationalization tendencies. And I think this is rather a political mandate to counteract these renationalization tendencies and to intentionally say and accept that the diversity of origins, the diversity of attitudes are the foundation for a democratic society. And then you get an idea of why the area of cultural education, intercultural education, and education as a whole, and the freedom of art are so important, especially at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for those insights. And we'd actually like to now move on to the second round of discussion. And these questions are directed at Johannes Ebert, Maya El Khalil, and Joumana El Zein Khoury, who are still with us on the Zoom link.
Great. So the second role is all about the role of the arts and culture in sustainability. And sustainability is also a cultural topic and a cultural question around it there. We are really interested in to see how can artistic and cultural approaches actually drive ecological cultural change. And Maya, I've heard that you've brought actually a couple of pictures for us to look at as well while you share a few thoughts.
You're muted,
Just one second, we're still waiting for the sound to come.
Okay.
Wonderful, we can hear you.
All right. I'm just waiting for the movie to play. I think somebody needs, I'm not sure who's going to share it. No? Okay, I'm sorry, there's supposed to be a film that is played while I'm talking, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to start talking about a connection that the German art historian Dorothea van Hantelmann referred to. She cited a relationship between the success of the modern museum and the failures of the climate response. Now, the modern mindset today, we cultivate an individual that is isolated from the world. So, and more specifically, isolated from nature. And when we are isolated from nature, this is when we can abuse. Nature today is object of abuse. People have started a movement to fight back by giving nature judicial rights, rivers as subject of rights. Martha Andreu mentored 5 filmmakers to reflect on the Atrato River as a subject rather than an object. Now, we are still definitely a very long way from this movement taking effect globally. Meanwhile, nature is fighting back all around us. Nature is prosecuting us, as we can see from, now we'll see them from these pictures from Arco d'Ato, where water is an aggressor in the delta between Bangladesh and India. These communities live the harshest results of the climate change. They have to survive poisoned rivers, burning forests, rising water, and submerged villages. Humanity is sentenced. The projects that have been funded by the Prince Claus Fund and the Goethe-Institut bring forth a motion to recover. On a positive note, in Mexico and the Caribbean, Gilberto Esparza is combining art and science to produce structures that operate within the confine of the coral, to rescue corals. In Peru, we have the Adrian Hartel Montalvo, who's working with the Shipibo community to transfer techniques of filmmaking for these individual communities, to use these films to amplify their voices and to preserve their way of life. Talked about nature as object of abuse. Nature prosecutes. Humanity sentenced. Motion to recover. There are 4 of the 5 narratives that we are using together to interrelate the results of these 15 projects and take me to the river. Now, it's not enough for the public to be sensitized. And it's the way it is not enough in times of crisis for the artist to just make things visible. We are all implicated. Nature has to become globally and universally subject of rights. I will just invite you tomorrow, because the 5 artists are going to be talking more in depth about their project tomorrow at between 4 and 5:30 European time. And they will discuss their project, and they will share their interdisciplinary perspective on climate change. We will have Virginie Dupré from the Congo, Adrian Hartel Montalvo from Peru, Mehran Davari from Iran, and Auguste Anais from Brazil.
Thanks so much, Maya, for those powerful pictures, and sorry that they didn't show right from the very beginning. And it's always great to see how those kind of projects and pictures actually make a very, very fact-driven situation all of a sudden experienceable by society. And it's great to see how this can actually drive some cultural change. Joumana, would you like to add a few things around it there of really how can the artistic and the cultural approaches drive that change as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember that when Johannes and myself, we met for the first time to think about this collaboration that the Prince Claus and the Goethe-Institut would bring together. For us, the environmental issue and the environmental theme was really, I think we decided on it quite quickly. And what we were very interested in is basically putting a net out there and seeing what would come in when you do an open call asking for artists from around the world to submit proposals and projects that are linked to the environment. We really didn't know what would come back. And it has been quite astounding, actually, when we saw the diversity of the projects that came in, the quality of the projects that came in, and the power of the projects that came in. And from what Maya has just shown us, you can see how artists are not only documenting the effects that climate change has, but also thinking on what kind of solutions can be brought in, giving a voice to the indigenous in order to see, what kind of culture that we are not familiar with can be brought in order to find new solutions for the climate change. And how the different regions around the world are dealing with it and what type of problems they're dealing with. And it's kind of, there's a very negative side to it because you see the effects that climate change and the horrible aspects that climate change is bringing throughout the world, but you also see the positive energy and the positive thinking that all of these artists and cultural spaces are putting in order to educate us, to not let us forget, and to give us hope. And that is, I think, what this collaboration with the Goethe-Institut has been so strong about and has brought to the forefront. In any case, for me personally, and for a lot of the people that I know who are working at the office, at the Prince Claus, but also a lot of our partners who have been looking at these projects, etc. So that's where my 2 cents.
Thanks so much, Joumana. You mentioned the collaboration with the Goethe-Institut. How was your experience, or what was the intention of actually creating this or initiating this together with the Prince Claus Fund?
Ja, ich möchte erstmal Hallo sagen, Joumana.
Well, first of all, hello, Joumana and Maya. Well, first of all, I have to say that we would have done this here before the start of the conference at a coffee, but it's wonderful to see you on the screens. And Joumana and myself had a phone call 2 weeks ago, and we agreed that this is a good project. And by the way, I think it was born or decided upon in a cafe here in Berlin. We were sitting together and agreeing on our cooperation here in a cafe. So, in the 1980s, I took to the streets against nuclear weapons and against nuclear power. So there were huge rallies. Do you still have photos? I'm sure I still have some pictures. So there was a human chain from Ulm to Stuttgart, 110K. So these were huge rallies at the time. So this has always been an issue that is close to my heart. And also for the Goethe-Institut, this was a big topic. Not only since we launched the project, but yeah, we have launched other projects on this. And before the event, I looked at the calls. It's a lot about rivers, it's a lot about water pollution, it's a lot about deserts. It's a lot about pushing the natural habitat into the background by humans. And what I've also seen, and my formulation earlier was a bit more general, what can art do? art opens spaces, art opens access, a different kind of access to these topics in order to understand them better. But I took a look at them in detail. So first of all, I think that art has the function of documentation. I remember a time in the 1990s when the big oil pest was of Exxon. I remember this bird that was full of oil. I will never forget this picture of the bird. And this is what Maya and Khalil said. It is documentation, but it is to understand nature as a subject. Nature was screaming and crying, and I think this is what art can do. And then networking. We connect artists, but also very young people. Last weekend, we had a hackathon for climate change with 250 young scientists and academics who asked themselves, how can we use artificial intelligence to combat climate change? And the third subject is waking up. So shocking other people, showing people that art can present things in a way that deeply moves us. And a fourth aspect is what a cultural institution can contribute, its best practices. I mean, all over the planet, we have all kinds of different stories how artists and civic initiatives deal with environmental pollution. And to collect and bundle these stories is our idea. We have one project, it's called Future Perfect. And this is maybe the fourth contribution that art can make. And I'm really pleased that with this Prince Claus Fund, we have found a medium or an opportunity to continue to work on this.
That art can really bring to it in education. Yeah, you mentioned it's a documenting function. Then it's about this disruptive, this really initiate, drive change. Yeah, but then once actually change is happening, it also needs to be sustained. Yeah, so we really need to take it into new routines, make it part of our modern new narratives, our new frameworks around it there. Yeah. So, and I would like to hear back from perhaps Maya and Joumana around it there. From your perspectives, is you're coming from different countries than Germany around it there. So, is in your countries, in your perspectives, the same roles for art, or do you see some of those functions more important than others? Maya, sorry, we need to just wait a second until the sound comes up for you.
Okay.
Okay, now try again.
Yes, so I'm saying yes, definitely. The power of art to disrupt is extremely important, particularly, I mean, where I'm coming from Lebanon, where we lost confidence in well, in politics and all the normal channels. So art still has a possibility to bypass and to open different channels of communications and different channels of getting us together to fight for what is important, to fight for what we believe in, to have our voices heard. So when you talk about art and culture, they do have the ability to create spaces where we can conceive whether the climate catastrophe, we can conceive change, and spaces that are really definitely beyond today the confine of science and policy. In recent discussion that I had with artists and culture producers, there was a statement that was made that for the activist, change is the objective, whereas for the artist, change is a consequence. I believe today, when we are in times of crisis, artists, they can and they should aim to make change the objective. It's not enough anymore to make visible. We are all implicated.
Thanks very much, Maya. And Joumana, perhaps a statement as well? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, coincidentally, Maya and myself come from the same country, which is Lebanon. As you all know, there was the explosion in Beirut on the 4th of August. And in the neighborhoods where the explosion took place, actually it was the neighborhoods where a lot of cultural organizations and small cultural organizations had their homes. And what was quite amazing is how strongly the civil society felt towards going and safeguarding and helping out these cultural organizations, because in a country such as Lebanon, cultural organizations have a crucial role to play, not only in the social structure, but also in the policies, but also in the history of what the country is, etc. And I mean, through the work of the Prince Claus Fund, we see time and time again, Maya was speaking about that change should be the objective for artists. We see time and time again examples of how artists are actually changing their realities and their contexts through the work that they've done. So I can cite, for example, a Colombian architect, his name is Simon Velez, who works with bamboo, and how he changed the law in Colombia in order to make bamboo a structured means to build in order to be more sustainable. I can also speak about, for example, Majun, who is from China and who has developed an app to be able to see all over China where the highest peaks of pollution are. And he gave the power to the citizens, so that it's actually the citizens who are putting on this app where the highest peaks of pollution are. Should it be air pollution or water pollution, etc. And how now the Chinese government is working with this app in order to ask big companies such as Apple, etc., to be more responsible in how they deal with the pollution that they are creating. So artists definitely have a role to play in changing the context, and they already are very much.
Thanks so much, Joumana. You both mentioned the statement change is not the objective, it's the consequence of an artist. I would like to direct it back to Johannes Ebert and to Thomas Krüger. What are your thoughts about this?
Ich meine, also das erste vielleicht mit Beirut, ja, unser Institut wurde dort ja auch.
Coming back to Beirut, our institute has also been destroyed. And this was right in this neighborhood, as you talked about. And all the different people working in the field, in the arts sector, they have been supported, and they are supported by civil society and by different partners. And I think this is important for the different civil societies. So the structures are important, and it is also important to be active. And we also collaborate with other artists. So I think making change happen via arts and via artists is important. But what I meant when I talked about documentaries or documenting something and making change happen, then I referred to another idea of the world we're living in. So another project we funded was a very interesting project regarding cocoa agricultures of farmers in Colombia. We also we showed this project in the Humboldt Forum. So we had a 360-degree display of reality in order to show how this untouched environment can look like. But now it is destroyed because there is deforestation taking place. And I think this installation was really interesting, and it referred to this knowledge and also refers to change, because we want change to happen. And another project we also founded in Kazakhstan regarding music on glaciers. There were two artists, and they recorded different the sound of the glacier melting. So this kind of, water running and all these sounds, and they brought it together and they created some kind of a concert of different sounds. And when you listen to it, then it's not only interesting. It was not only like being in a concert and listening to it. People have also been moved by it and were deeply touched inside. And I think sustainability and climate change are different or very important processes. And of course, they need to be handled or, let's say, treated by artists also at schools. We also fund projects or collaborations with children in Congo, for example. And I think these are very important projects.
Different roles can take different shapes wherever you are, in which cultural context around. And what's really important is creates this change of perspective. Yeah? Take people out of the ordinary context, allows them to see in a different world. Herr Krüger, what are your thoughts around this?
Also ich glaube, dass eine ganz wesentliche Frage.
So I think an essential question is a precondition, or used to be a precondition for this idea. So a precondition for arts is to think about another space, to create another space. And this is also the same when it comes to civic or citizenship education, to rethink society, to think about a different society. And this is the same for arts and for visual arts. So thinking about outside the box, not only referring and thinking about the status quo, but to create new conditions, to create something new in order to facilitate, in order to create a new life, to enhance or to move forward, to boost discussions, to mobilize forces within society in order to create change and to facilitate change regarding climate change, deforestation, in the Amazonas, for example, or wherever all over the world. So important questions that need to be put in the center of interest in the public discourse, and to rethink different solutions or to think about other ways of dealing with these problems. And I think arts and also citizenship arts are open-minded, and politics or policy has a specific mission and specific objective. There's a very specific interpretation, but I think art can be seen or rethought in different conditions. So we also need to think about the supporters of arts and also civic education, civil society participation is important. So people need to participate in the change. So I'm not talking about or referring to the power of politicians or economics in general. No, future is a space we need to think about. First of all, we have to create it, we have to shape it, and I think artists can, let's say, open up this antichambre, this first draft of something new, of a new world, and they can create a new world.
So we really need to create this protected space to actually let it room and get around it. Mr. Goergens, I know you haven't been part of that round here, but I would be really interested you being part of a government agency around it. How does this go together? Of having to actually go and have a policy and having clear objectives. And on the other hand side, creating those spaces to let it mushroom. How is this happening? I'm just looking at in terms of getting some lessons learning out here. It's all about we're now just dealing with the pandemic and all the dynamics that are happening there, but it's also about what's coming afterwards. So how is this being now already thought through? Any immediate thoughts or
vielleicht zwei unmittelbare Gedanken.
There's two ideas. So first of all, talking about the pandemic, the lesson we've learned is that not only people are vulnerable, but also whole societies, they are vulnerable. And there is a huge impact, and what we need to do is to raise awareness, and people are already aware of what we need and how people can come together and what societies need, not only in their own societies, but also regarding the connection between societies. And this is the same, we can translate this into arts. So we need freedom of cultural institutions, because only art or arts can create counter models to our reality and create new ideas. And I think this is more than just talking about the freedom of speech, for example. So what we need is art much more than we thought in during the last 10 years, and we need art more than the discourse or the narrative, because we have to rethink our, let's say, as human beings, we have to rethink our relationship to nature and to the future in general. So what we need is not only to open up our minds, but to open up our hearts. This is important. And I think we should not only think in political dimensions, but also in artistic or, let's say, creative dimensions. And this is my job, the question how to translate, how to put this, how to move this into reality and into politics, and how to realize this idea. And this is definitely a mission. Thomas Krüger is also very much experienced in this field. And this is also my mission, because I work in the Federal Foreign Office. So it's about supporting and also thinking about people and the different cultural
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it all starts with the people and then it goes through the institutions. Yeah, Steve Jobs once said it's very easy to connect the dots in hindsight. Yeah, but it's very difficult to connect them in anticipation around it there. And we're in the middle of such a journey, and the theme of our talk was around lessons learned. Yeah, so I would like to come into around our final statements. Yeah, and there is this proverb about never waste a good crisis. A crisis, a pandemic, is always creating windows of opportunity as well, things that have never been thought possible. Other things will actually get much more institutionalized than they've ever been before as well. So it can go in both directions. So in terms of taking the best lessons forward to go collectively as civic society onto that journey, I would like to give each of you 2-3 minutes at the end to summarize what kind of lessons would you like, or what kind of messages would you like to give us onto that journey of actually driving cultural change in a way that we've just described. And perhaps we can start with our two virtual guests, with Maya and Joumana. Yeah? Maya, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. Basically, the biggest lesson is that we need to be connected more than ever today. We need to create new spaces. And as artists, as artists and as collectives and interdisciplinary collectives, we need to reach out so that we inform the public and we get together, because an informed public can vote into politics the people that can make change and that can pass legislations. So this is a very big role for the artists today, but not only as artists, as part of communities and as citizens. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maya. Joumana, would you like to continue?
Yes. Yeah, I think if there's two things that we've learned from the pandemic is that, climate change has no boundaries, basically. So today the pandemic is an extreme case, but even if you look at other cases, you can see how the climate change affects all over the world. So that's one thing, there's no boundaries. And the second thing is that with this pandemic, that was an extreme case, we were really able to reach out and to stay connected in very different and innovative ways. And I think this has been really a learning curve for the Prince Claus Fund and for the partners of the Prince Claus Fund, but for many other people. And what I would like to end by quoting one of my favorite philosopher. He's from Martinique. And he speaks about the importance of changing by exchanging without losing oneself. And I think you touched on it, that the importance of basically being able to see the other's perspective in order to know how to change and how to while continuing to be oneself. So that I think is very important in today's world, to offer a different perspective and to see how to build on that.
Thanks so much, Joumana. Johannes, Ebert, you would like to go next?
Yeah, just three things. The first thing is that all of a sudden we are in a totally situation, and very rapidly, very creatively, and very courageously we all responded. That really impressed me, I have to say. And I'm also speaking about the Goethe-Institut itself now. And I really hope that the feel that you can be rapid, creative, and courageous will sustain when this pandemic is over. I hope that this feel and feeling is still with us. And then Maya said something very important. It's about communication, communication, communication. And then the third point, we can do a lot with digitization, with digital media, with digital tools. We can do much more than we had thought before the pandemic, but we also need interpersonal encounters, and we need spaces where people can personally meet. I'm really yearning for this, and I wouldn't have expected this, that it's such a yearning. Thank you, Johannes, Ebert.
Missing that human contact. Yeah, it's in the end, we're really social beings, and yes, it's so much more enjoyable as well to discuss face-to-face and actually experience other people. Andreas Görgen, would you like to continue?
Vielen Dank. Aus dem Neuen oder aus dem Erlernen von Verletzlichkeit.
By learning what vulnerability is, something positive can emerge. And this is more carefulness, more mindfulness, and this also changes our understanding of humanity, of our own position and our responsibility to nature. And this brings us to the topic of sustainability, but also our understanding and concept of equality, because the pandemic is a global one. And it is also about a different concept of diversity within the concept of humanity. And working on this, continuing to work on this, continuing to develop this is a political mandate. And Europe plays a specific role in this because Europe is the continent that exploited other continents. Europeans just went somewhere and said the nation state is now the solution to secure peace. And I think this is now being questioned. And it is high time to learn lessons, to learn more lessons from this. Thank you so much. Well, I think that the pandemic has reminded us of us needing a culture of unlearning. So what we have done, what we have thought so far is now being challenged and questioned by many different limitations. And to deal with this means to start to question what we have done so far, to unlearn what has been successful so far. And in this context, it then becomes important that we finally learn again that other options are possible, that there are spaces for opportunities that we need to discover. And this brings us back to Hölderlin, who has already been quoted today. So indirectly, he said, hexameter, friend, come to the open. So he asked us to discover new spaces, to facilitate future, and to question old-fashioned things, and to replace old-fashioned things with new ones, with new ideas. And I think the crux of the matter is to connect these spaces of opportunity with mindfulness, carefulness, sustainability and solidarity, so that the resources of this planet are not wasted away, but are secured.
Herr Krüger, and thanks very much for all the panelists, Maya and Joumana joining us virtually here. We would really love to have you here on the stage with us, perhaps next year. And thanks so much for the panelists on the stage for setting a really nice scene for the conference to come. I think we have lots of really interesting topics and debates ahead of us. And thanks so much for making the way coming to the Berlin Congress Center for us. And I think we get some music now. Cool.
Le soleil ici se m'aianta, mais la tombe l'amour se m'aianta. La mort ici se m'aianta, mais la neige est pour tout enfant. La mort ici, c'est au Mayanta. Mais l'attends pas, la mort, c'est au Mayanta. La mort ici, c'est au Mayanta. Mais la neige est pour toi, enfant. 1, 2, 3, 4. Manita, tia belle, Mayanta, regarde-moi, Mayanta, Manita, tia belle, c'est toi pour la liberté, Anna, Mani, give me to my belle, Mayanta, oh, Anna, Mayanta, Mani, give me to my belle, c'est toi pour la liberté, Anna, liberté, liberté, voilà, madame là-bas, Mayanta, elle fait tout pour moi, et moi je fais tout pour la liberté, et j'attends la révolution, Mayanta, mais le soleil brille, Mayanta, je suis encore ici, moi je fais tout pour la liberté. Liberté, liberté, voilà, attends-moi là-bas, Mayanta, elle fait tout pour moi, et moi je fais tout pour la liberté, et j'attends la révolution, Mayanta, mais le soleil brille, Mayanta, je suis encore ici, et moi je fais tout pour la liberté.